Hi everyone, my name is Jeanette. Welcome to my diary of my adventures in knitwear design. This is the first episode in English. I've been doing some podcasting in Latvian and I finally got the courage to do it in English. I'm originally from Latvia and I moved to the UK in 2006, right after university, where I studied computer science. My daughter was 0.9 years old at the time, and I thought that it's London. I'll just get a job like that, but that was not the case. That's a different story altogether. Eventually, I did get a job as a programmer, as a PHP programmer, building websites. Then at some point, not longer after that, I started working for a startup. I was employee 25 or so, and I ended up working there for 8 years and saw it grow into this multinational corporation with offices all around the world. It allowed me to travel a little bit, and my career progression led me to become a product manager, and all to do with this technical stuff. And after 8 years at one company, which is really atypical for that industry. I think most stay at one place for a couple of years and then move on to better things. I decided to give it a try. Quit that said company, which is Essence, by the way. But I never quite found anything as good. I never felt as good anywhere else. I experienced all the women in tech issues, mansplaining, white male entitlement, and I'm not going to go into the rants of working in the tech industry, but I met my husband, and approximately 3 years ago. We're now married and we have another child. So I eventually had to go on maternity leave, and after maternity leave, I could not even picture myself going back to the life before. The early 5 o'clock getting up, getting on a train to London, commuting, underground, that was something unimaginable. So this diary is going to be my journey of becoming the next best thing, knitwear designer. How I stumbled upon it, what is my approach to it, and I'm going to be quite open and honest, because that's who I am. What you see is what you get with Latvians. I'm very straightforward, and it might get opinionated. I've been knitting since I can remember. My mom, both of my grandmothers were knitters. That's because they were knitting out of necessity. Not only it was a Soviet Union country, and it was hard to get unique things. Everything was quite centralized. But also it's bloody cold, so you have to have knitwear to stay warm. And we did knitting at school, and I really enjoyed it, and it was quite technical, and I really liked the puzzle. I'm an engineer at heart still. I like the puzzle of figuring out how things fit together. What I didn't know before I left Latvia was that there were such things as knitting patterns. I thought that designing knitwear was part of knitting. So if you told someone that you know how to knit, for me that meant you know how to swatch, you know how to calculate how many stitches you need to cast on and how many rows and where to do shaping. That was all encompassed in the term knitting. So discovering that other people need written out instructions of how to knit a garment or anything. That was really surprising. I didn't really think of it that much. I never needed a pattern, so I didn't know that. I assumed that some people need it, and it's got nothing to do with me. I went on with my life, knitting the way I was taught, and I considered it my hobby that I took on every 3 years. I would knit something, and then because the tech job is so all-consuming, there's rarely space for knitting, especially in London. But when things get really bad and I get sad, that's when I go to my knitting rescue. Then I went on to maternity leave, and I was waiting for my son to be born at home. After this really high intensity tech work, all of a sudden you have pretty much nothing to do and no one to hang out with, because all your social connections are work related, and it's just kind of cut off with a knife. And you get that nesting feeling that pregnant women do. I picked it up again, and my son was actually a couple of weeks overdue. The due date was said to be 2 weeks before he was actually born. So I was sitting on the edge for 2 weeks waiting for the moment to the labor to start. I actually finished 3 labor projects in that time. And I started putting my work on Instagram, and my friend said, well, you should start writing it down. You should start making patterns. And I was still dismissive. Like, who would want to knit this? I'm sure that no one cares. And I just kept knitting and putting things on Instagram, and I found some Facebook groups with knitters and all of those things that I had never really considered part of knitting. Like, my Instagram feed all of a sudden turned into this from, let's say, from plant-based foods and CrossFit inspirations. It turned into a knitting feed because I discovered the knitting hashtags, and it got really, I got really immersed into the knitting world and discovering all these things. Like Ravelry? I did not know about Ravelry until last year. Everyone was mentioning the term Ravelry, and YouTube with its tutorials, with 200s of cast on and bind off methods. It was my knitting world seemed to have gone from I know how to knit a sweater in this one way to, oh my God, there is so much for me to learn. And I thought I knew how to knit, and I thought I was good at knitting. But then it was really like the ocean that is out there. That when I cast on last April, I cast on this sweater that I'm wearing, and it was probably my first sweater that I was, my first yoke sweater as well. I decided that I will write down how I do it. I will give this pattern writing a try. And so I bought a little book, and I started drawing the schematic and the chart for the cabling. And that was it. I made the decision to write my own pattern. Let's think about this. A person who has never really seen a pattern. I mean, I had seen some patterns in hobbycraft, in like a wool shop, and laying my eyes on a pattern was immediately kind of, I was what's the best word? Repulsed. It felt it looked like total gibberish. What are all those acronyms? MP, M1P, K2 TOG. What? This is like completely different language to me. This is not how I knit. So that was my knowledge of patterns in last April. I didn't know, like I had my way of designing and writing things in my on pieces of scrap paper and then throwing them out and never looking at them again, or counting rows in a certain way. What goes into a pattern was just as unknown to me. Like what is the actual pattern structure? What are the elements that make up a pattern? How to write the instructions so that other people can follow. I mean, usually the thing is in my head. These cables are in my head and I know how to manifest that in a stitch by stitch. But then if I had to explain it to someone, there must be a way, because it felt like I would have to write a book. Can I just post a chart? Is that okay? It turns out, no, you can't just post a chart, because a lot of people do not like charts. They hate charts. That was a big surprise. And I discovered Stitch Fiddle, and it was like, oh my God, this thing is going to turn my chart into a textual instruction. That is brilliant. So yay for that. I accidentally stumbled upon another designer talking about tech editing, that her pattern is being reviewed by a tech editor, and that was also a new thing. What, someone actually reviews the pattern and edits it? And that was my biggest kind of confidence boost, because I all of a sudden realized that I can actually get this done right. It's not all on me. I can ask for help from people who have done this professionally, and that was like, whoa, I could actually do this. And that was the first time I started believing that it can be a real thing for me. That there's people who can help me get this over the line. And the next realization was, I need to actually make it for multiple sizes. So for smaller and bigger people to wear it. How do I do that? That felt like to me 8 different sweaters, but then doing a lot of research and reading blogs and YouTube videos, I saw that there's process in that as well. And final big surprise was test knitting. I accidentally saw on Instagram calls for test knitters, and then being a programmer, I realized that every piece of program we write, we have people who test it before it goes out to the real the customer. And the same applies here. This is just an instruction, and I need someone to go over the instruction to see whether it compiles, whether it's actually possible to follow, and if there are any mistakes before it gets published. So all of these things I knew nothing about in April 2019. Fast forward to today, I have 5 patterns in my Ravelry store, and I have found my calling. This is it. This is me. And in the next episode, I will talk about my designs, things that I've got in progress, and my ideas for near future. I hope you enjoy that. Thanks very much for watching.